Hello and welcome back to another GCSE revision lesson. Now guys, I want to begin by firstly saying a massive thank you for all of you guys who literally send me so much love on YouTube in the comments, in my polls, but also on TikTok. Guys, if I don't say this enough and if I don't get a chance to respond to all these comments that I get from you guys, as well as even emails, I want to firstly say a massive thank you, okay? It's because of all the love that you guys tend to show me that I keep on doing all of these videos. So I hope that you're going to find them continuously helpful in your road to securing that amazing grade in your English GCSE exams, okay? Now guys, one of the things in the poll that I put out that you guys said you really need help on is language paper 2, and more specifically question number 5. Now, when it comes to this question, I tend to suggest to students that actually passing this question is fairly and relatively easy as long as you are aware of general topical issues. What do people tend to talk about when it comes to what you're hearing on the radio, on the news and so on, because there tends to be just general topics that AQA tends to select to test you guys on and to see, number one, do you happen to have an opinion on it? And number two, are you able to not only argue your perspective, but also consider why people might disagree with you in your counter arguments. Now, what I want to do in this video is to present with you 3 major topics that I always suggest students need to have an opinion on and even prepare for as part of the language paper 2 question number 5 revision. And as you can see behind me, I've basically created essentially plans to go with these topics. And guys, if you find this useful, especially because obviously within this video, I'm going to be going over just 3 topics. I've literally suggested 7 main topic areas. And so if you want to see me show you guys more plans for other topic areas and other topical issues, do let me know in the comments. However, what I want to show you guys is, say for instance, you were asked a question, or you were, for example, in school, or even in your final assessments, you were asked to write about either technology or social media, which is a massive topical issue. Is technology good for us? Is social media good for us or not? Then this is my suggestion in terms of how you can debate this topic. But also another interesting topical area that tends to come up is to do with young people and their attitudes. Are young people entitled? Are they lazy? Are they, snowflakes and so on? And here, as you can see, I've put together a really brief plan with the main points that you can talk about and the main counter arguments that you can discuss when you're writing and considering this topical area. And of course, another very popular topical area is to do with travel. Is it good? Is it bad? For example, is it too expensive? Should we all travel or should we just stay at home and, watch about other countries or other foreign places on TV, right? Travel tends to kind of mold itself into different forms of questions. And it's actually an area that AQA has asked exam questions on, I believe 3 times so far, okay? So I'm going to begin with the topical area, which is to do with technology. This is an umbrella term for example, phones. Are they good for us? Social media, is it good for us? And the argument that I'm going to take, and I'm going to show you how you can take this argument and points and made up statistics and made up anecdotes that you can consider is, I will say that if the statement, let's say the statement says, technology is not good for us, it's bad for us, I'm going to argue that it's actually good for us. And this is what you can include. And this is a plan that you can kind of memorize when you're writing any language paper 2 question 5 response on the area of technology. Number 1, one of the major reasons that you can argue that technology is actually really good for us is because it helps people learn. And you can make up a statistic. You can say, for example, 80% of teachers have used some form of technology, Google Classrooms, OneNote, to help the students learn. So if anything, far from being bad for us, technology is actually really, really good for us because it enhances our learning and teachers really rely on it. That's the first point. But also, the second reason why you could argue that technology/social media is really good for us is because you could argue that it reduces our sense of isolation, even lifts up our depression, right? For example, let's say, there's kids in school who are getting bullied, they don't have many friends, they can turn to their phones, they can turn to social media platforms to make online friends, right? And you could argue, for instance, Sally Smith, who's a year 11 student who maybe suffers from bullying in school, actually turns to TikTok and her online friends to ensure that she doesn't feel isolated, okay? Technology has been a game changer for her. That's the second point. And of course, the third point is actually technology is really good for us because it helps us stay in touch with people globally, for example, relatives abroad and so on. And I'm probably going to argue in this point that maybe you could say, BBC in an interview with, John Smith from Cambridge University stated that actually technology has enabled a lot of families to keep in close connection with each other. That's the main reasons that you could argue that technology is actually really good for us, / social media or anything in that area. However, of course, you need to consider counterpoints. The first major one is, of course, that social media technology can be very addictive. And the made up statistic and the made up counter argument you can say is, gov.uk found that 85% of teenagers are addicted to their phones, are addicted to social media. And of course, another counter argument is technology / social media can cause mental health issues. For example, John Doe, who's in year 11, he has lots of sleep problems because he constantly checks his phone at night, okay? That's what you can consider if you're writing about technology and whether it's good for us, whether it's bad for us. Let's consider the topic area of young people. Are they entitled? Are they a spoiled generation? Is your generation a generation of snowflakes? Now, I'm going to argue that, say for example, you decided to agree with it, okay? And I'm just saying this, it's not necessarily that I believe this. However, if you wanted to say argue and agree with that, the first point you can say is, for example, modern life has made things so easy for young people. That's why they are snowflakes. That's why they're so entitled, right? And you can give some examples. For example, you can talk about technology, mobile phones, trains, how easy it is to travel anywhere at such a low cost, and also, of course, our easy access to things like phones. This has made young people way too soft today, okay? So in that case, you're given some examples. A second reason maybe to make this argument is to say that young people have zero responsibility except to study. And you can make up a statistic, say from Oxford University, which found that 95% of teenagers have no jobs. Hence, if they complain about how hard life is, then actually that means they're taking just the easiness of their lives for granted, okay? And the third reason which you could argue that young people are indeed snowflakes is that, lots of young people are very coddled by their parents. There's even the term helicopter mums that, are constantly at the beck and call of their children. And in this case, to support this idea that yes, young people are very entitled and they are snowflakes, you can maybe make the argument that Sally Smith, who's in year 11, she has a helicopter mum who hasn't really taught her any kind of way to cope with any form of adversity in school and even in her everyday life. However, the counter argument could be, number one, many young people today are overachievers. If anything, you can look at people like Malala Yousafzai as examples of young people who, started achieving from a very young age, okay? And here, for example, maybe you could use Malala as an example, or you could make up yet another anecdote and say, John Doe, who's in year 11, he studies using his phone and technology, right? So rather than him being this entitled young person that's really lazy, actually, he uses technology and all the things that are available to him to boost his learning. And then the second counter argument could be that actually young people are right to argue and complain about things, life being too hard, and especially things like GCSEs being too challenging. They are actually indeed quite challenging, and life for young people today is harder than it ever has been, right? And the counter argument and the counter statistic maybe is to say that gov.uk in a study found that, after it interviewed lots of university undergrads and asked them how difficult, when they think about GCSEs, A-levels and university, 80% of undergrads in university found that GCSEs was the hardest and most challenging time in the academic year, right? So maybe you could use that as your made up statistic. Now, of course, the final topic, which is a very popular topic, AQ has chosen it in different past papers, is the topic of travel. So say, for example, you've got another question on travel. This is what you could talk about, right? And this argument will be supporting the importance of travel, saying travel is good, right? So if you were to take that argument, number one, you could argue that travel is enlightening, okay? And then you can make up this statistic that, not only does travel help us reduce our stereotypes and prejudices, right? So if you go to a country that you've heard of, but actually physically go there, you then stop having these prejudices. Actually, Cambridge University, totally made up statistic, said that travel makes you 70% more likely to have a foreign friend. Okay, so travel is actually really good for you because it reduces your levels of prejudice. The second reason that you could argue that travel is really good is a lot of people say, you know, oh, travel's so bad, using planes and so on is really, really bad for our environment. But actually you could argue that there's lots of pollution-free forms of traveling, for example, trains. And this is actually a real life example. Interrail, which is a train service company, has low pollution travel across Europe, and for a fraction of the cost that it could cost people to take planes, for instance, and with very, very low levels of pollution, you can see lots of different countries across Europe using services like Interrail. Okay, so that's a really, really powerful example that you can use to say that actually travel, not only can it be inexpensive, but also it doesn't have to pollute the planet. And then of course the third point could be travel is actually really good because it boosts our levels of language learning, right? So for example, traveling to places like France, which helps us understand languages like French, right? Especially for people taking French GCSEs, Germany, Spain, and so on. Travel is essential, right? It actually helps us boost our knowledge of even different languages and become bilingual. And here, I'm gonna suggest maybe using and making up an anecdote. Sally Smith, who's in year 11, found that she learnt more in spending a week away in France, right, in Paris, than she did her entire time she studied her French GCSEs in England, right? So obviously that's a very dramatic example, but that could be a good anecdote to use to support the idea that travel is really important and essential. And of course, counterpoints could be, number one, travel is really bad because it can actually be really dangerous. And of course here, you can make up a statistic saying that gov.uk found that people who are under 18 who traveled were 60% more likely to be kidnapped. Totally made up statistic, but of course that could be the counter argument. And of course the second counter argument as to why travel could be really bad is it's far too expensive. And of course, you know, you can point to a lot of people saying, oh, you know, you could have discounted train travel. But what if you are, anecdote, John Doe, a single dad of say 5, something even as inexpensive as a £50 ticket to go to, you know, Spain. But if you have to buy £50 for yourself and also for your 5 children, that the costs quickly rack up, right? So that could be a second reason against travel, that it's far too expensive for a majority of people, especially people like John Doe, who's a single dad, okay? Anyway, guys, that's really it when it comes to the key topic areas, especially technology, young people, and travel. And as I said, guys, when it comes to language paper 2, it's actually fairly easy to do quite well in this part of the paper, as long as you're well versed on topical issues that people talk about on the radio, on TV, and so on, okay? And if you found this useful and you want me to go through all 7 topic areas that I tend to suggest to all students to have an opinion on, or maybe even a plan on, I'm happy to do so in next week's video. Thank you.